Good afternoon, fellow ruminators. Welcome back to another session, Rumination with Andrew. Thank you so much for joining as we are about to discuss a very important topical matter. And this afternoon, let's look at the Jamaica teachers or the Jamaica's Teaching Bill Council, whatever that is. But it is a council or a body that has been formed or designed, I should say, to craft policies to standardize and to professionalize the teaching profession in Jamaica. Now, we have been seeing a lot of commentaries in the papers in the Jamaica Observer and also in the Jamaica Gleaner, pushing back against this Jamaica Council or Jamaica Teaching Council, whatever it is. But what it has to do, it has to, it is tasked with professionalizing and the licensing of teachers. For those of you who do not know, Jamaican teachers are not licensed as teachers are licensed in the United States. To be able to teach in the United States, you have to have your license, right, which is issued by the Department of Education or a state license, etc., etc. Now, what's interesting is that the Jamaican teachers are pushing back, including the administrators, the principals, and the vice principals, because I think they're saying that there are a number of things that they're not very happy with, that they're not content with in terms of what the government is doing. One, they say that the council comprises, I think they would be made of 30 or 31 members. The council would form or comprise 31 members, 23 of which are non-educators. Now, how can you have a body in which you have non-educators and administrators forming a large bureaucracy in which teachers are not even the majority of that particular council? That is not fair. Then how is it, why are teachers trained if they're not able to, craft and be autonomous in the decisions that they make? So I think that the government has to rethink its position. Why do we have these so-called technocrats who are largely making up this teaching association, this teaching council? And I think that that is a worthy point. It's a credible point that has been raised by the teachers. And I think the government should look into it. I think if you're having a teaching council, I think you should have three-quarter, if not half to three-quarter of the people being educators and administrators. And then you can have people of other professions to join and to perhaps, render their objective, if there is going to be anything objective about the policies that will be crafted. Now, we are hearing from many commenters, even those who are not teachers, that teachers, are not professionals. They should have a body that makes them professionals. I don't think teachers need that at this juncture of our history, the history of the world, as well as the history of Jamaica. What we're seeing in our world is our professions, which are controlled by politicians and by technocrats. And what they do, they form huge bureaucracies, which they are paid huge sums of monies to corrupt, and they impose their corrupt activities and their corrupt agendas on these bodies. I do not have to repeat, because I guess I would be suppressed, my information here will be suppressed if I talk about the pandemic and the World Health Organization. If you want to know what is ahead for the teaching profession, look at what is happening to the medical profession and how they have licensed it and the history of the medical profession in the United States, because people take for granted that the United States medical infrastructure is the way it was when the country was first founded. It is not. It has had huge transformations over the years, including teaching profession also is not the same that the founding fathers desired it to be. But as America started to enter into the realm of being an empire and wanting to be a global power, it had to internationalize its systems, its political system, its medical system, and also its education system. And the education system in America is in a mess. And what it aims to do is only create professionals to who will work for industries. That is what it's about. It's not to create people who can think and who can think independently. And that is why for many years they have decided to put humanities, the study of history, philosophy, languages, and other things, at the back, so that they can talk about the scientific studies, because science is about, according to them, rational thought and objective thinking. And it is not objective thinking when you look at what they're teaching and what they're doing, because a lot of the scientists are not able to challenge the orthodoxy. They aren't able to challenge orthodoxy. They're only able to, to forward the thoughts that have been, and to expand, I should say, on the intellectual thoughts of their predecessors. And that is what happens, and that is what is going to happen in our education system. Jamaica's education system, we know that it was bequeathed to us by the British. And give the British their credit, they did leave us and a well-organized system of education, right? It is, for all intents and purposes, a well-organized educational system. The problem with us as Jamaicans, because we continued the planter-based economy and we have this deep class tensions there, we decided that we would leave the majority of our people behind and, have the number of schools sufficient to accommodate the jobs that are available, because it was not the intention, and still is not the intention, I should say, of Jamaican politicians to create enough schools, enough quality schools, so that Jamaicans can be properly educated, and that they can be empowered, and that their minds can be enlightened. It is not the objective, it is not the agenda of our politicians. And for that reason, they are, barely moving ahead to build new schools. They build one or two here, but when last have you heard that we've built 20, 30 schools for the 63 years that we're approaching our independence? We're about, to be now 63 years as a so-called independent nation, and we have not, I'm not sure if we can say that we have built 30 schools or 40 schools. I don't think we can say that. Have we? Now, we should have built 300, 500 by now. What about 1,000 if we had set the goal, if we had set our minds to that goal? But we didn't have any goal for education. Education was just simply there. And when you look at the infrastructure of the physical plant of most of our educational, precincts, you realize that we are way behind, we're lagging behind. Now, why is the government so interested in pushing a bill, a Jamaica Teaching Council bill, through the Senate without building the physical and the educational infrastructure in Jamaica? Right? The physical and the pedagogical infrastructure. Because what we have are teachers who are frustrated and who are leaving. And professionalizing and licensing of teachers do not mean that they are going to, if the profession is going to be a noble one, and that the excellence that once came out of the Jamaican system will continue. It doesn't mean that it's going to be an excellent system. What it does mean is going to be more control, and that teachers are not going to have the autonomy to decipher what they want their students to learn. The United Nations and their multilateral bodies are the ones who will determine what your children ought to learn and they ought not to learn. And we can see in Trump's America right now that the Trump is even outlining books that should not be read and books that should be, kept off the curriculum. And that is what is going to happen there. They're going to determine what should be taught in schools and what not to be on the curriculum. The teachers will no longer have that autonomy. Now, if teachers are trained to develop curriculum and they have to go through that rigorous and robust training, professional training, why should we have a body, a council that is made up of bureaucrats and technocrats? Why should teachers, subsume? Why should they lower their standards to such level of education and control? These are the questions that we need to pose and we need to ask the Prime Minister, Andrew Holness. Why? Now, this Jamaica Teaching Council um, certification board has been in contention, my understanding, for over 20 years. And the teachers have, they have been asking the successive prime ministers to amend some of the conditions that are mentioned in the council. And the government has not sought to do that. What governments tend to do, particularly in the global south, they become silent when you have, there are lots of noise and protests. Then you have, silence. And then at the right moment, then they push through their agenda. When you least observe, when you are not even by the stretch of imagination expecting that they would push through that particular bill. And that is what Andrew Holness is hoping to do now. He thinks that it is the right moment in which he is going back for a third term in office, and he seems to be popular among the people there. And he is actually working on a lot of projects, including road projects, and he's working on building and refurbishing hospitals. So he's thinking that he can get all of these things done. He can push through all of these things so that he can say that he merits a third term in office. So that is what Andrew Holness is doing. But is that in the interest of the educational infrastructure, in the educational system? I don't think it is in the teachers' best interest. And why isn't Andrew Holness meeting with the teachers and listening to them rather than talking and telling them what they ought not to do and what they should feel about themselves? Having a title, being credentialed and saying that you have a BA or MSc or a doctorate doesn't mean anything. If in your head you have nothing, you're empty. It doesn't mean anything. But that is what that's the world we're living in right now. People are credentialed and they think that they are educated, and the two are not synonymous. The two are not synonymous. The same thing, being credentialed and having a license does not mean that you are a good teacher or you're a good lawyer or you're a good doctor. It just does not. The two are not synonymous. There are other professional standards that can be met and that can be demanded other than having a mere qualification. The teachers, the fact that they've gone through some training, it means therefore that they should be certified. Right? The fact that they specialize in college. Remember now that Jamaica Teaching Association, the teachers' colleges, once it was primary education, so you had to study everything. The teachers who got their certificates back in the days, they had to study everything. They had to study music, and that's why you saw many teachers leaving, teachers' colleges, and they were able to play the organ, right? Because they had to do everything. They had to do math, they had to do, science, they had to do, because at that time, the teacher was known to be everything unto everyone, right? So he was the community's accountant, the community's counselor, the community's musician, pastor. The teacher bore all of that weight on his or her shoulder, right? In Jamaica's, former teaching or education landscape. In the 1980s, it seemed that they seemed now to transition in the early 80s, transition the education system in Jamaica to more specialization, where you go there and you specialize in Spanish, or you specialize in math, or you specialize in English, or whatever that you were specializing in. But as the decades went by, I think even the teachers who specialized in the early 80s, who would have been my professors, who would have been my lecturers, they could also note that the teaching profession was being watered down. And a lot of the things that they had to do, for example, if they were doing literature, the number of books that they had to have read, even outside of the curriculum, was just, supersedes the number of books that, the crop of students who went to college in the 1990s would have had to read. The system was watered down practically, and the standard had deteriorated. So even though we were, actually seeking to uplift our standard, to raise the standard, to meet international standards, because we want to always copy everything we see abroad. And I'm not suggesting here that good elements and good standards ought not to be adopted. I think they should be adopted. But oftentimes we just uncritically adopt something that is coming out of North America because it's coming out of North America. And we believe that because it's coming out of North America, it suits our system, but it does not suit our system at all. Because if the truth be told, many of our teachers in the United States, the only reason they're there is because they see a way out economically. They can cut and curve. Not that the teaching profession in the United States is excellent too and pays very well, but it's better in terms of that they can cut and do some savings so that they can pay their bills and pay their student loan, whatever bills that they have to pay, right? So, but if you look in the United States, and if you read many, many journals there, you will see that the American teachers are leaving the profession, even though they have this so-called standard of licensing them and they're so-called professionals. But they're not better than our Jamaican teachers, right? The American teachers, the American licensed teacher is not better than a teacher graduating from Shortwood Teachers College or American Teachers College, not better. In fact, that's one of the reasons why they're down there all the time. Yes, because the teachers are leaving. That's one of the reasons too. So the vacancies are there. But it's not only that. They could also go to other countries. But they see the value of the Jamaican teacher and the fact that going through the teachers' college, I believe that the old pathways are the best ways. And it's not only for religious purpose. The old landmarks are still the best landmarks. The old way of learning language is still the best way. The old language of doing mathematics is still the best way. The old language, the old method of studying science or whatever you're studying is still the best way. And I'm not suggesting again that you can't tweak it. You can see, but don't throw it out as they did. We threw out the baby with the bathwater, and lots of good elements in the old landmarks. We have destroyed them, we have demolished them, and now we find ourselves being void, being empty. And the teaching profession is left now in chaos because we want to adopt foreign policies that don't suit us. And I see the likes of Gordon Robinson, Gleaner commenter, Gleaner political pundit, whatever he is, right? And he was suggesting that the teachers are, expressing discontent and their dissatisfaction with the governments, the prime ministers, wanting to professionalize the system. And then there's the same old argument that they're suggesting that lawyers are professionals. Who cares if lawyers are professionals? We know the corruption that happens in the legal profession in Jamaica and throughout the world. And many of them just went through school and they're not as good as they think they are. They just have a title, they are credentialed. But that is where the buck stops. And I'm not suggesting that they're not some good lawyers, but many of them are not good. Not because they're credentialed. We can say the same thing about pharmacists. We can say the same thing about doctors. And we saw what happened. In fact, what happened during the pandemic, we see where these bodies, these licensing bodies, that the ones that issued their certification, they are revoking doctors' certificates, their license, because they stood up for what was right during the pandemic. So that is the level of control that portends the teaching profession if they should allow this Jamaica Teaching Bill Council to pass through our Senate. That teachers will be controlled. So if there is something on the curriculum and the teacher is saying, hey, I'm not in agreement with teaching that, or even if you teach it, you might not be allowed to tell your students that I don't believe in that. For example, I don't believe in the theory of evolution. What if I am a biology teacher? Yes, I would teach it, but I would tell them that I do not, and I would give them a different perspective, right? For the students to be able to think, because that is a whole matter of education, for them to see different perspectives and to be exposed to different narratives and see which one they would, align themselves with or to, right? But the fact of the matter is that what we're seeing now is that we're seeing imposed narratives that these dictatorial bodies want to impose upon a profession. And if you don't do it, if you don't walk in lock and step with what they say, you will be decertified. You will also perhaps face, your job loss. You'll be fired. You'll be dismissed from your job. So this is not just about professionalizing, as they're suggesting, the teaching profession or the licensing of the teaching profession. In the United States, if you just go to a 4-year college to learn how to teach, and they leave there without learning how to teach. They don't even know how to teach. They don't have the rigorous teaching practice as we used to have in Jamaica. In fact, I understand that those who went to college before the 1980s, in the 1970s and before, you had to go on a 1-year teaching practice. Now, we went on 8 weeks, and that was like, was it 12? Maybe it was 12 weeks. I can't remember. It was probably 8 to 12 weeks. It could have been 12 weeks that the teachers had to go on teaching practice. And it was a nightmare. For many of us, it was a nightmare because why? We had to create all these props, and at the time, Jamaica didn't have technology. So people had to make all of these creative things to go into the classroom, spent all nights up. And you have to go there and show enthusiasm. You don't know when your advisor is coming, your internal assessor or your external assessor. You just don't know. They just pop on you like that. So there's no way that you can plan for them and know that they're coming, so you prepare yourself. No. If you are going through a bad day, and even if you had a great lesson before, right? You had an excellent lesson before, all of a sudden they show up when you're not so hot. And you might not have planned thoroughly, or you might even not feel well for the class that they come or they show up for. So it was a nightmare. So can you imagine those who spent a year, I would say, in the wilderness, out there in the wilderness on their own, and having to be assessed by both your internal and external assessors. So the teaching profession was much more rigorous back in the days. And I can see that because, I lived with a teacher for some time, Mrs. Tucker, and she was just an amazing teacher. And to know that these people never had a BA or a BEd, a bachelor's in education, they had just merely a certificate. But when I told a musician of the highest quality, when she spoke English, it's almost like, I don't know if Mrs. Tucker ever even made a mistake. The facility that she spoke English with was just unspeakable. When you asked her, even in her old age, to write stories, write short stories, I mean, it's like a professional writer. She would write for the papers and stuff like that. And you really wonder, math, she was also good at math because they had to do everything in those days when she went to, I think, Bethlehem Teachers College, the Bethlehem Moravian Teachers College in St. Elizabeth, right? She had to do everything. She told me she had to do everything. Graduated with distinction, top of her class, right? But we're not seeing the level of teaching quality and the rigorous, nature and professional tasks that teachers had to go through back in the days. We're not seeing that anymore. And when I left Jamaica and I went to the United States and I spoke to some of my former teachers at Michael Teachers College, they would tell me how it had deteriorated. Right, the standards there had deteriorated. And by the time I'd left, maybe it would have been 6-7 years afterwards, Michael College and all the teachers' colleges were offering bachelors in education. At the time when I went there, they were only offering diplomas. But yet still, the diploma teachers had a higher standard. As I'm suggesting, I think in some cases, the certificate teachers had a higher standard. So what we're seeing are these people are just going through a system in which they are not educated They have just been through the pursuit of knowledge, but they are not properly educated. And this is something that we have to understand, we have to grasp. What is really an education? And I think that there was a quotation here by this author, and I want to read you what she considers an education to be, because we need to rethink about what we want when we say education, right? Because we think that it's just going there and getting a degree or getting a certificate, and that is what makes you into becoming a teacher or becoming a lawyer, a doctor. The writer here suggests our ideas of education take too narrow and too low a range. There is need of a broader scope than the pursuit of a certain course of study. It means more than a preparation for the life that now is. It has to do with the whole being. That's what it has to do with the whole being. So we should be studying, our teachers should be studying music and everything, sports, everything at the teachers' college that they can pass on that to their students. And with the whole period of existence possible to man, it is a harmonious development, as education is the harmonious development of the physical, the mental, and the spiritual powers. It prepares the student for the joy of service in this world and for the higher joy of wider service in the world to come. So education should be about service and should not just be about how much money am I going to make? Because that is what we have now turned the whole matter of education into becoming. And doctors are no longer doctors, but they're just in the profession because they think it makes a lot of money. And when you look behind the scenes of how the money is made, you realize that do you really want to become a part of that system? The true doctors, that is, because it's corrupt to the core. And these corrupt moneyed interests that control these professions, they are the ones who dictate what the students should study and what they should not study. And this is the sort of agenda that is being set right now as we speak for Jamaica and the world. It's already in the United States. And that is why the United States is in chaos. Its education system is in chaos. Teachers are leaving because not only that, they're not being paid well, but they don't have no autonomy. They have no control over the students and what they do or they do not do. And our system is moving in that direction. If it's not yet there, it's not yet fully there, but it's fast moving in that direction. Why isn't Andrew Holness spending his effort, exerting his effort into building new schools, into attracting qualified teachers who are properly remunerated? Why isn't he expending more effort? Well, he's, I understand, trying now to get school buses and also to feed our students. Why isn't he exerting his effort and influence into building new chairs for our schools, new, facilities? When you look at what the students have to sit and how they have to sit in the classroom, it is horrendous on those metallic chairs, right? Why don't we build some chairs? Why don't we have carpenters, so they can get to work and build some chairs, some softer chairs? Our kids are in school for how many hours per day? 8 hours or more, some of them. And they have to sit on those tough metal chairs. And those chairs have been in the classroom from the 1950s. The Jamaican classroom looks horrible. The Jamaican classroom, for the most part, the typical, I should say, not all of them, a few of them have been modernized. Of course, those schools that have a very robust old boy or old girls association, they make their contributions. But for the most part, our schools are in dire straits financially. That is what we should be now putting our minds to and seeking to attract qualified, highly competent teachers and not seek to discourage them. Yesterday in the papers, there was a teacher who talked about, having upgraded her qualification. And this has been going on, I think she said, for more than a year, that in which she has upgraded her qualification to a bachelor's in education. And she has not received her remuneration and her back pay. right? Even though she has long submitted it. We need to make the profession more efficient also, and the bureaucracy more efficient. So if we have an inefficient bureaucracy already, how are we going to even have a more effective one when we expand the bureaucracy? And the Jamaica Teaching Association bill, whatever you want to call it, is expanding the educational bureaucracy in Jamaica. And the educational bureaucracy in Jamaica is already a horrible one, right? So I think, Andrew Holness, before we are still babies, we have not yet learned to walk. The educational system in Jamaica has not yet learned to walk. We're still creeping. Some schools are walking, and let's be fair, but the majority of our schools are not walking. They're still creeping. So I would urge the Prime Minister of Jamaica, Dr. Andrew Holness, to ensure that the majority of our schools begin to walk first, and to look at improving the facilities and the teaching competence of the teachers in our teachers' colleges. Ensure that they have the supplies, they have the technologies to be able to teach or to be current with their respective teaching specialization. That is what we need to do. When I went to Michael Teachers College, how many years ago? There was not much change that we saw there. Not much change, apart from some whiteboards. We need to see much more change, a transformation of our educational facilities. And then we can talk about a Jamaica Teaching Council Board. But all of this professionalization of teaching and it's a ghetto, right? What we're producing are, people are telling me, there are principals there who are telling me that even the people who studied English went up and they did English and other things, when they write their applications, it's filled with a lot of grammatical errors, right? And these are the teachers who studied English. So what about the ones who did not study English? So we have serious deficiencies in the system that need to be reckoned with, that need to be resolved. And at this point in time, we don't need to be talking about a Jamaican or a Jamaica Teaching Council, the certification and the professionalization of teaching. Who cares? Teachers want to be paid well, and they want to work in an environment that is conducive to learning. And the Jamaican physical plant is not conducive to learning. I remembered I told you when, was it second year of my training, that I was sent to Mall Road primary school or whatever. It's not primary, secondary school, junior secondary school. And I had to tell them, sorry, can't go there. I could not. I was happy. Well, luckily for me, I was able to identify another school, and my Conian helped me to get into another school. So I was blessed, and I was going through quite a bit of struggles at the time. I told them I could not teach at Mall Road at the time, secondary school. It was so depressing. It was like I'd gone to a cemetery. And you have to give the teachers, you have to give these teachers their credit, that they go there daily and they have to deal with a lack of resources. And when I went there, I saw a body of very good teachers, energetic, intelligent, right? And perhaps better than I was at the time, and still am. And they dealt with it, So these are the teachers that Andrew Holness and the government of Jamaica should be incentivizing. Just a mere certification from a corrupt body. And we're already seeing how the medical board and all these boards are corrupt. They are corrupt. And we're just going to stack on and add more corruption and bureaucracy and technocracy to our government, which is going to leave the teaching profession much more to be desired, right? With much more to be desired. But that is not the government's agenda. The government's agenda is to foist up on Jamaica this global international perspective and agenda of wanting to control everything that we do or we say. And teachers will no longer have the autonomy, right? And I understand that it's not only agenda for Jamaica, but it's for the world at large. But the Caribbean, because I read yesterday in an article that the Caribbean teaching body, whatever they call themselves, they're also against this certification agenda and the professionalization of teaching in Jamaica and by extension the Caribbean. I think that if this goes through in Jamaica, because we are always the ground on which all the experiments are done. Haiti and Jamaica, yes, the two prime countries where global experiments are done. So if this bill is passed in Jamaica, I'm sure Barbados and Trinidad and Tobago and all the other Caribbean countries will also pass that bill. But Jamaica is also being used as the testing ground, right? Because we are the guinea pigs of the Caribbean and the world. Economic experiments, political experiments, murder experiments, ethnic cleansing experiments. Because what we have been going through in Jamaica, if you don't understand, we talk about what is happening in Palestine. But if we are not a country at war, and we have been ethnically cleansing our own people since the likes of the 1970s, 1,000 and more per year, how is that different from what is happening in Palestine? And our people are silent because we're living through a culture of silence. So we can't talk about it. But we'll go and we'll protest that free Palestine, right? When in our back doors, right there in our purview in Jamaica, ethnic cleansing has been going on for years. And if we add slavery to the whole horror story, we can say that slavery was an ethnic cleansing, right? So ethnic cleansing has been going on in Jamaica for centuries, right? But I just wanted to say that because that's not the point of my discussion this afternoon. What I want to focus on is the fact that the teaching profession in Jamaica is now being taken over by an elite body of people. And that is what government is all about, because government has also been captured. And all the major institutions of Jamaica and the world by extension have been captured. Now, there was an article here in Medium, and I want to read you a perspective, the dark truth of the education system shaped by John D. Rockefeller. Now, hear what John D. Rockefeller says. I don't want a nation of thinkers. I want a nation of workers. That is what the agenda is. I repeat that. John D. Rockefeller, one of the United States' most prominent elites and oligarchs, says here, and I repeat this quotation, this direct quotation citation coming from John D. Rockefeller. I don't want a nation of thinkers. I want a nation of workers. John D. Rockefeller. The American educational system, a cornerstone of societal development, has undergone numerous transformations over the years. One influential figure in shaping the landscape of education was John D. Rockefeller, and he's not an educator, a name often associated with wealth and industrial prowess. However, as I delve into the annals of history, a disconcerting truth emerges, one that raises questions about the true motives behind Rockefeller's educational endeavors, right? During the early 20th century, John D. Rockefeller, a titan of the American business world, sought to leave a lasting legacy. His philanthropic initiatives, particularly in education, led to the creation of the General Education Board, that's the GEB, in 1902. On the surface, this seemed like a benevolent move, with Rockefeller expressing a desire to improve the educational system and uplift society. However, a closer inspection reveals a more sinister side to his actions. Rockefeller's influence on education was not solely altruistic. The GEB played a pivotal role in imposing a standardized model of education across the nation. This standardization, while seemingly efficient, carried with it a hidden agenda to mold a workforce that would serve the interests of industrialists like Rockefeller himself. And that is what we have produced around the world in Jamaica. You know, workers who will please the industrialists. So whether they're pharmacists or they're doctors or they're teachers, they're lawyers, they will please the industrialists. By imposing a uniform curriculum and promoting rote memorization, the GEB aimed to create a compliant and obedient citizenry, well suited for factory work. Well suited for factory work. And many of you think that factory work means just somebody going into do manual labor in a factory. It means whether you're in a hospital, you're a pharmacist, you're a doctor, you're a teacher, that is also you working for a factory. The emphasis on conformity stifled creativity and critical thinking, limiting the potential for independent thought and innovation. And that is what they don't want. They stifle independent thought and innovation in our school system. And you just want to go to university. Go to any American university and you'll see that. And if that was happening in the time when I was in university, and I'm sure that it has worsened tremendously, significantly over the years, right? Can you imagine what our educational system is right now? Right? Because most of us who were independent thinkers, innovative thinkers, found the educational system very stifling. Be they Michael, be they any university in the United States, stifling. Those who understand what education is about and what independent and critical thinking is all about. We were not at all pleased by what we were seeing. We weren't enthusiastic to go to classes. I went because, I was sent and, I thought that I'm not going to waste my money. And that this title was important. But at the end of the day, you realize that the educational system is really fraught with a lot of control elements. Listen to what this article continues to say. In addition to standardization, Rockefeller's influence extended to suppressing alternative educational models that posed a threat to the industrialist agenda. Independent and progressive educational methods that encouraged critical thinking and individualism were sidelined in favor of a system designed to produce obedient workers. So everything is now group work. Right? You need to go back into group work and you need to have all these group studies, right? And you need to entertain your students. It is not about you, the teacher, it's about them. It should be a student-centered approach. That's what we learned during the 1990s. And all of your methods have to be a student-centered approach. And what we have now, because we have had the student-centered approach, the students are now in charge and they have more rights and more power than the teacher. And the teacher has lost his or her autonomy in the classroom. And I'm saying it because I'm a teacher. I've experienced these things. So I'm not speaking to you as an outlier. I might not be in the classroom now, but the fact of the matter is that I know that things have not changed because I still continue to see what's happening there in some of my visits to the classroom. And you see the growth and the deterioration. And you see the lack of education coming out of our schools. Even among people with PhDs, sat in classroom with many of them who should not have gotten PhDs and even masters and BScs and all these degrees. But again, the more you can consent with going with the agenda and you're willing to work as an industrial labor, then you will have no problem with it and you'll be credentialed. The quicker and the better for you. To truly understand the dark motivations behind Rockefeller's educational initiatives, one must explore the broader context of his industrial empire. Rockefeller, the founder of Standard Oil, wielded immense power and wealth. His interest in education was not merely philanthropic, it was a strategic move to ensure the perpetuation of his influence and wealth. Okay? And that is what it's about. It's not about educating our people. This whole agenda of Jamaica professionalizing the teaching profession, right, into a body and to make them feel that they have a license and here you're a licensed teacher is just for ultimate control. And if you do not go along with the agenda, you are going to lose your license and then you will not be able to teach. Right? That is what it is all about. And I'm not suggesting here that we shouldn't have an accountability board and Jamaican teachers should not be held accountable. I think that we should improve on the standards. But it's not just by emphasizing licensing and wanting to professionalize, quote unquote, the teaching profession or whatever it's called. It's a profession, whether you like it or not, because if I profess something and I profess to be a teacher, I am a teacher and I belong to a profession. Whatever you profess to be, whether you're a professor, it means that you teach, whether you're a pharmacist, that is your profession because you profess, that is what you profess, that, and you were trained in that particular specialization. So I don't need a body to tell me that here you go. The teachers who came and the external assessors who critiqued my work as a teacher when I was on teaching practice, they should know if I have the competences to teach. Now, it can be that teachers might have to upgrade themselves, every 2 years or 3 years in terms of teaching, where somebody comes to their classroom and assesses their work, which I think that happens in Jamaica, where supervisors come and test their teaching and give them feedback and stuff like that. Right? So there are other means and ways of holding teachers to account. And not because we have all of these professional bodies like in medicine and nursing and whatever they are, does it mean that these people are held to account? Oftentimes they're not held to account, particularly the ones who are closer to the politicians. By shaping the educational system to serve the needs of industry, Rockefeller aimed to create a workforce that would be docile and subservient to the economic machine. And that's what we have in the world. The ulterior motive was to maintain control over the labor force, ensuring that individuals remained cogs in the industrial wheel rather than empowered critical thinkers capable of challenging the status quo. That is what we have now. While John D. Rockefeller's contributions to education may have left a lasting legacy, it is crucial to scrutinize the true motivations behind his actions. The standardized educational system he helped create, with its emphasis on conformity and suppression of alternative methods, raises questions about the genuine intent behind his philanthropy. Right? As we reflect on the historical roots of the American educational system, it becomes apparent that its origins are intertwined with the interests of powerful industrialists. Understanding this ugly truth prompts us to re-evaluate the current state of education, inspiring a collective effort to break free from the shackles of a system that may have been designed to hinder rather than nurture the pursuit of true knowledge and individual success. Right? That is what it's all about, control. And that is what the Jamaica Teaching Bill is going to do. That is what the Jamaican Teaching Bill is going to do, to control the teachers and to destroy and to disappear their autonomy within the classroom. I hope that the government is listening. If the government is not aware of the agenda, that they begin to read more and to assess critically and to listen to our teachers. They're the ones in the classroom facing the daily challenges. The government has absolutely no idea of what the teaching profession and the challenges that they face within that profession on a daily basis. He has no idea. And they're the ones who must be the bedrock of this Jamaica teaching bill, if that is going to be one. If that's the need to be one, then let them know that Jamaican teachers are autonomous, and we need to have half of the board members or three-quarters of the board members to be teachers and administrators, those who understand the role and the mission of the noble teaching profession. Thank you so much for joining. I hope that you like, share, and subscribe, like the videos, so the videos can be shared with as many people on the platform. Would you?